Welcome to the deep dive on deepfakes. I'm Serena Vishani, and my partner Richard Tanaka and I are going to tell you a little bit about this topic. Let's get into it. So, a little bit about me. I'm Serena Vishani, like I mentioned. I'm a second-year business administration student with a concentration in information systems and a minor in creative writing. I currently work at Fairview Capital, a venture capital and private equity firm located in Connecticut. And this past year, I worked for the Journal of Threat Intelligence and Incident Response, where we published academic journals about cybersecurity, incident response, threat intelligence, intelligence dissemination, cybersecurity, cryptocurrencies, and deepfakes were included in that topic as well. I'm going to hand it off to my partner, Richard Tanaka.
Hi, I'm Richard Tanaka. I am also a second-year information systems concentration, and I currently work at Salesforce as a business analyst, bringing technologies such as cryptocurrency, deepfakes, and kind of the metaverse to market. So Serena's going to keep us going.
So I'm going to give you guys a brief overview on what this presentation is going to cover today. So first and foremost, I'm going to be giving you guys a history on the issue, how it originated, why it originated, and the first recorded case, as well as current legislation. So I'm going to be looking at legislation in terms of a federal perspective and a state law perspective. Richard is going to dive into the technology of this, why it exists, how it exists, and really kind of the mechanics of all of that. And he's also going to talk about the benefits of deepfakes, because they have a lot of benefits for society. We'll kind of get into this by the end of our paper, but just a quick foreshadowing is that there's a lot of good out there, and we're going to argue that deepfakes are beneficial for society. And lastly, Richard is going to talk about the social impact. Richard and I will both get into some aspects of the social impact, as well as various business practices and our conclusion, and that'll wrap up our presentation for today. So beginning with what are deepfakes, just establishing a common ground, a common definition, MIT came up with this great one that I found that just says it's a specific kind of synthetic media where a person in an image or video is swapped by another person's likeness. And if I was putting that in my own words, I would honestly just keep it really simple and think, someone else's face on someone else's body. It's fake news, not meant to be there, and it has immense ramifications for citizens everywhere. So diving into the history of the issue a bit, a Reddit user actually coined this term after his own username back in 2017. So we can see that the issue is really relatively new. And what he did was he shared pornographic content using this open source face swapping technology that Richard will really dive into the mechanics of later on in this presentation. And actresses were actually the target in his videos. And we'll see a little bit later on that political figures get targeted as well. But actresses were really where deepfakes truly originated. So, like that previous slide kind of contextualized, politicians kind of came later on in the targets of deepfakes, and I really want to take a look at this great example of a deepfake. It's the Belgium Socialist Party that posted this deepfake of President Trump. Richard's going to pull that up right now, and we're going to show you what a deepfake really does.
Belgium. This is a huge deal. As you know, I had the balls to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement, and so should you. Because what you guys are doing right now in Belgium is actually worse. You agree, but you're not taking any measures. Only blah, 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 bing, bang, boom. You even pollute more than before the agreement. Shame. Total shame. At least I'm a fair person. People love me because I'm a fair person. I'm the fairest person on earth. So Belgium, don't be a hypocrite. Withdraw from the climate agreement.
So I'm not sure if you guys caught kind of the gist of that, but essentially President Trump, or the deepfake of President Trump, is actually criticizing Belgium for staying in the Paris Climate Agreement. But the very last line of that video, I know it got a little bit quiet, it said the climate change is fake as well as this video. So the video really self-identified as a deepfake, and I mean there were even critics of it mentioning that this isn't great deepfake technology and it wasn't used properly and it wasn't very believable. but more comments than not were actually outraged. They genuinely believed it was ex-President Trump speaking on the Paris Climate Agreement and attacking and targeting Belgium. And one of the comments even said Trumpy needs to look at his own country. And the Socialist Party actually had to come forward and declare this video as fake, so we can really see how deepfakes as political speech can really categorize and characterize and honestly incite violence. So Richard found this awesome image here that I want to touch on a little bit, and it's essentially the timeline of deepfakes and synthetic media in general. So like I mentioned earlier, the Reddit user coined the term in 2017, and we can see that this timeline begins in 2018, which is really when this technology and the effects of deepfakes really started to come into play. And it goes up until 2021. Obviously 2022 isn't on here, but this year we of course are still affected by deepfakes. But if you look at some of these examples, you can see that it's Tom Cruise, you can see Joe Rogan, you can see David Beckham. We can see that famous figures or celebrities and actresses are being targeted as some of these deepfake videos. But you can also see Nancy Pelosi, ex-President Obama, and a lot of political figures being targeted in this as well. And as social media becomes the primary driver for how our news is spread, whether that news is real or not real. I mean, the 2020 election really helped contextualize that with President Trump's tweets and a lot of information being spread on social media. As political figures tend to be targeted in this, we can really see false news just going everywhere, and it's really affecting voters and in making their decision. We're going to touch on that a little bit later, but this really helps show on a visual level what's going on here. So as we've really established and characterized deepfakes and synthetic media in general as an issue, it really brings us to examine what legislation is in place. And beginning on the federal level, there's three main acts that we're going to dive into slightly more. It is the Communications and Decency Act of 1996, the Stop Online Piracy Act of 2012, the Protect IP Act of 2012 as well. And these three acts really gave headway to the Deepfake Report Act of 2019. So beginning with the Communications Decency Act of 1996, this outlawed the knowing display of offensive material to people under the age of 18. So it's really protecting our minors here. And the CDA prohibited individuals from knowingly transmitting any of this material or messages to anyone under 18. So you can see that messages, materials, all these types of media are protected for our minors, but it doesn't address deepfakes directly. The Stop Online Piracy Act also made note of the US law enforcement to combat online copyright infringement, online trafficking. So again, not quite deepfakes specifically, and the Protect IP Act was slightly more in that vein, but again, not truly when it was talking about how the internet site associated with the domain name was a tool that should be a location tool that should be treated with the same privacy. So these three acts really helped give way to the Deepfake Report Act of 2019. And it makes sense that this came out when it did, because like we really talked about here, deepfakes are relatively new, and the term was even coined only back in 2017. So the Deepfake Report Act was published by the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, and they essentially put out a report requiring the Secretary of Homeland Security to publish annual reports on these deepfake technologies to really help mitigate, address, evaluate this damage on an annual basis, because if they don't know how to properly regulate the technology and the platforms, they're at least staying ahead in terms of damage control. So now that we've examined legislation in place on a federal level, we really take a look at it on a state level. So Texas was actually the first state to pass a law on this, and they criminalized the distribution of deepfakes 30 days before an election intended to deceive and harm a candidate's reputation and misinform voters. California also followed suit with a similar rule, but a little bit stricter, saying no to 60 days within an election. And as we can tell, both of these laws were really passed in accordance to politics, and it's a great response to all of the controversy surrounding the 2020 presidential election. And social media was a massive tool at that point between President Trump and a lot of our leaders utilizing social media for what seemed like the first time in a manner to really spread information and news and affect candidates, or affect perceptions of voters for these candidates. So Richard is going to go into the technology portion.
Okay, so when it comes to technology, the way that deepfakes are made is through the use of deep learning neural networks. So these neural networks can be matched with facial mapping technology. And this is used with AI and machine learning to, in real time, swap someone else's face onto another face. So this is an example of a high quality deepfake. Serena had mentioned before the use of it with actors, politicians. So this is a great example of it being used with Tom Cruise. And you can see, you can barely tell that it's a deepfake. And really at first glance, you can't tell at all. So as you can see here on my right, he's not even looking directly at the camera. So you can see that it rendered his entire face from all different angles, from the front angle, and also even using the use of sunglasses. So this is an example of a really high quality deep fake, and a high quality deep fake that was used with very expensive computing systems, and a lot of time and money went into this. This was spread all over TikTok about a year ago. Here's another example. This was an older example. It was in 2018, if you saw on the graph before. This was one of the first examples of the use of deepfakes. It was created by a marketing firm. And you can see that it really looks like it's that former President Barack Obama. But if you look, this one here is actually a deepfake image of him from the video. And this is really important because in this video at the end, like the Trump video, they stated that it was fake. But it shows that if they didn't state it was fake, there could be uprisings, there could be problems, and it could really impact elections and impact our country. So there's also cheap fakes. Cheap fakes are what you typically see. These are really cheaply made. They're actually, you can make them using current GPUs and CPUs and computers, and consumer computers that you can go buy at Best Buy. So using a cheap computer, a normal computer that you have in your home, with the connection of open source software that's typically free, that can be found on Reddit, the dark web, or GitHub, you can take that, pair it with one of these cheap computers, and really create anything you want. And then the next image here shows, this middle one, for example, is Jim from The Office with Michael's face on top of him. You know, you can obviously tell that that is a deep fake. Same with this one over here with Trump's face on someone, and this one as well. It's real obvious that it's a deep fake. But the issue is these were created with very cheap, widely accessible technology. It is just getting better. These are years old. As technology and graphics cards are improving, deepfakes are going to improve as well. This is a great example. This is a student in Australia. This is Michelle, and she was 18 years old. At 18, while she was applying to be a student, she looked up herself on Google. You know, we've all done it. We've typed her name into Google, see what comes up. She went to images, and she was expecting to see some family photos or some social media posts. But what she found was explicit content. Explicit content that she didn't create, explicit content that she didn't even know existed. A user on one of these pornographic websites uploaded images from her social media. They pulled it off of all the images off her social media, Instagram and Facebook, and paired it with pornographic images from other websites, and put her face creating this content. And she's now an attorney, and she's working hard to fight these issues. And she's also a Forbes 30 under 30. But in the next slide, you can see that for her, it was completely horrifying. It was dehumanizing, degrading, and violating to be in this situation. I know in her interview, she referenced that even at work, she was receiving emails from her peers saying that they found her content on the internet. And that's just so dehumanizing. And this is affecting not public figures, but normal everyday people. So that's really key. And I know in her story, she worked really hard with companies and online providers to try to remove the content. But the issue is as the content was being removed, more content was being uploaded, and she still cannot get rid of all of it today. So now we're going to go into some benefits. We've talked about the issues, talked about the current laws, but there's a lot of great benefits for this technology. So the first example, if you want to click, is language barriers. So the whole world has gone on Zoom. We all are working from home. Even this class has had a couple Zoom classes. And the cool aspect with working from home or having these online meetings is that language barriers have the potential to be broken. Currently, you have to have a translator, but in the future with deepfake technology, in real time, the voices will be changed to the correct language for that user, and the face can be changed with a deepfake, making it seem like they're talking in that language. So it has the potential for removing all language barriers. This can also be used in TV and entertainment when dubbing over for other languages. Another example is the Mona Lisa. So this is an art example. You can see this is the original image here, and then the ones here and here are actually deep fakes that were applied to the face, being able to add facial expressions to the Mona Lisa. This is a really cool use case because I know it's also been used with people who have loved ones that passed away. They can take photos of their loved one and create deep fakes, making moving photos, making videos from the photos. Another example is synthetic media. So this is Bill Whitaker from 60 Minutes. If you're a watcher of 60 Minutes, you can tell that he looks a lot younger in this video. And he does. This is a video from 30 years ago. And 60 Minutes was able to take the old footage of him. They were able to put it into the computer system and use it to create news stories today. And you would never know the difference, other than he looks a little bit younger. So there's a lot of great use cases for this. Is you can create specific media as well. We spoke about that in our paper a little bit. But you can create hyper-targeted news stories that address the user because you can just change the text that is put into it and it changes the news story. Now, healthcare is another really cool example. I know that the Mayo Clinic and NVIDIA have partnered up and they've really made some great strides. So realistic data can be synthesized and researchers can use this for treatment options. So there's kind of two sections. The first section is that these images can be created. And with the creation of these images, doctors in training can use the deepfake images that were created instead of using private, HIPAA-protected patient data. And NVIDIA and Mayo Clinic has teamed up and they've created a deep learning backed MRI scan system. So the research found that by training these algorithms on medical issues, and only using 10% real images, these algorithms were just as good at spotting tumors as algorithms with real images. So this has the potential to protect the users in the medical field, and the consumers in the medical field, and the patients, and be HIPAA compliant while still allowing for a lot of training. So for business practices, I'm going to hand it over to Serena.
Hi guys, back again. I really want to talk about the couple of companies that deepfakes have been most primarily distributed on. So as you can kind of see by these images, Facebook, YouTube, I mentioned Twitter in that first bullet point as well, have been sort of the primary drivers of deepfake distribution. And a lot of that was just because videos are quite common on there. And so Facebook and Twitter actually both outlined a ban of manipulated media and expanded this to include deepfakes. But as we know, we've studied Facebook a lot in this class, and we can tell that they don't care about their users' privacy, their users' data, any sort of compliance that Facebook has to have with the Federal Trade Commission. They've simply violated, and they're under a lot of fire for that. And so we believe that consumers don't even know how their information is being handled, let alone whether Facebook truly cares about the users being affected by these deepfakes. And I'm going to hand it back over to Richard, and he's going to talk a little bit about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which really helps these companies find footing on this issue.
So the issue is that under Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, it really grants a lot of immunities for these platforms. So it makes it so when it comes to user content that they're not liable, they're not responsible. So that's really problematic, when it comes to these deepfakes, like the social impacts before, where she had all this content on the website, she contacted them, tried to get it down, and then more came on. It's really a laissez-faire viewpoint from their perspective that, they're covered under this immunity, so they don't really have pressure to act swiftly. And for this next part, just for our conclusion, there's a lot of great aspects for deepfakes. We saw the benefits, we saw the past issues. We think that in the future, there's a lot of potential for positive aspects of deepfakes. And that we think with the correct laws and with the correct regulation, it could be really great potential for technology.
Just touching on what Richard had said, and kind of as he's outlined so many examples within the medical field, for art, for all of these aspects of our society to come alive, it's clear that proper legislation is really the only thing missing about making deepfakes kind of a really beneficial aspect to our society. He suggested the solution of Section 230, and we believe that this would really be the thing that helps deepfakes, like we were saying, become truly positive in this society. We hope you guys have learned a lot from this presentation, and Richard and I thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really enjoyed this, and we hope that that Section 230 can be amended to hold companies liable, and that we can make this technology a potential